My name is Ben Kimmel, and I'm 45 years old, and I'll be sober 27 years on April 1st. I got sober at a young age, and it's not easy to get clean at a young age because everyone gets high or drinks or does something. And I was fortunate that I was removed from my surrounding, and I went away to a long-term treatment. And I've had difficult times, but through it all, I didn't drink. I didn't use drugs. I learned that that's just a small symptom of a much different problem, and it's been an interesting transition. But I'm proud of who I've become. Just around my 17th birthday, I was arrested for breaking and entering, and not sure what the other charges were. I had a few of them, and I wasn't really ready to get help. I didn't think I couldn't see why people wouldn't drink or do drugs. It didn't make sense to me. They gave me an opportunity to take treatment instead of jail. So I would have looked at 1 year plus 90 days, but at that point I was really sick. I weighed about 80 pounds. My skin was green. My black rings beneath my eyes, and the fact that remains I wouldn't have been able to do well in jail. I remember exactly what they told me when I was in a holding cell. You're too light to fight, too thin to win. And that was me. I was too light to fight, too thin to win. So when they gave me a choice to go to rehab, I accepted it. And that's what made all the difference. I was removed from school. I'd been thrown out of my junior high, we called it. I'm older, so we called it junior high. I was thrown out of my first junior high, I think my second time in ninth grade. And then I went to a special school for kids with special needs, and I was thrown from that due to behavioral issues. And I wasn't going to school anymore. I picked up crack and heroin somewhere around the age of 15. And I was working for my family's business, and I just slowly started to deteriorate. And I think that was the painful part. That was the painful part. It was hard to see what I was turning into, and it was hard for me to interact with my parents. And then once I started feeling the habit come in, it was a wrap. I always felt different. I always felt like I wasn't like anyone else. I always thought something that would make you laugh. I might laugh too, but it just wasn't that funny to me. I never understood how things worked. I didn't know what depression was. I didn't know that addiction was real. I didn't know what alcoholism was. I didn't know what any of these things were. I just always knew that I felt different from everyone else. And nothing I did I could never feel alike, and when I was thrown out of school, I was lonely. When I didn't have the certain rites of passage that come with high school. Like, I never got to go to a prom. I never did driver's education class or anything like that. I never pulled up into the high school with my first car. I never had any of these experiences. I didn't, I traded that for a different life. And, I had to work because otherwise they couldn't leave me home. So I worked for my parents in Jamaica, Queens, and we were 2 doors down from the methadone clinic. And my father used to wonder, how come you're friends with these people that go to the clinic downstairs? Why do you down the block? Why do you know these people? And I said, I don't know. I just see them around. I think it was hardest at the end, especially, and I wanted to die. I really did. I wanted to die. I dealt with depression and wanted to die for a long time. And this kind of just eased the transition for me. It was something to smooth the ride. I was sitting in this jail cell it's a holding cell. And if you don't know, you can't know, but I'll explain it to you. It's a hardwood bench to the right of the room. Across from you is a flat wall. In the rear left-hand corner is a stainless steel commode / water fountain, which the smell there it just smelled like body odor, urine and feces, and it smelled like cleaning supplies. And I remember sitting on this bench and across from the bar, the cage in the front was windows at the top of the wall. And I remember looking, and the walls were tilted inward, and I was able to see a crack of like the outside light, and I felt okay with it. Like I was like, well, at least I don't have to do this tomorrow. Like at least tomorrow is going to be different. So I started feeling hope. I think what really changed is when I went away and I learned what mortality was. I learned about people dying, and my father got sick, and it was 2 weeks before Christmas Eve, and I was living at a farm for a long-term treatment facility. I was on a farm called The Family, and I really wasn't sold on this getting straight thing. I really was figuring I'll just do my time, get out, and go back to being who I was. And 2 weeks before Christmas, I got a call that my father had a heart attack. And I remember getting mad, and I punched the wall. This is the last time I ever punched the wall, by the way. And I punched the wall, and this guy that worked in the rehab goes, "Who are you trying to intimidate? You know, you punched the wall. There's a hole in the wall. We got to fix that. Your father's still sick, man. You gotta cut it out." So they sent me home, and I went home to see my father. And he says, "Oh, you look good, kid." And he told me something that I didn't hear from him for a while. He said, I'm proud of you." And I didn't do anything that he could be proud of. We used to have family functions in my house. We used to have family get-togethers, and I wasn't invited, and it was in my house. I had to stay in my room, you know, because I looked bad, and I didn't behave well. And I just was so unlike everyone and everything else. It was painful. So to hear my father say, "I'm proud of you," I didn't know what, I was taken aback. I didn't know what to do. 2 weeks later, it was Christmas Eve. I went back up. Everything was fine. My father was on the mend. On Christmas Eve, we went down. There's a pond in front of the farmhouse, and it would freeze over, and we would play dodgeball. We would play dodgeball on the ice, and there was a counselor named EJ, and he says, "You got to go upstairs." And I said, "Why?" You know, it was a therapeutic community, so they were big on being strict. They said, "You got to go upstairs." And I go, "Why? Tell me what I did." He said, "You didn't do nothing." I said, "I'm not going up until you tell me what I did. Because you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. Just go upstairs." And I didn't want to go. And then he finally brought me upstairs to the main house. And he says, "Why don't you have a cup of coffee?" And I says, "Why are you being nice to me, you know? You're never nice to me. You always give me a hard time. Why are you being nice to me?" And he says, "Kid, just please take the coffee." I'll be honest with you, I would have taken anything. I would have taken jail. I would have taken the sentence they gave me. I would have found out. I would have taken a new charge. I would have taken anything. Just don't take my father from me, because I never had a relationship with him. I never had a good one. And I think that's when I started to open my eyes, when I realized that life isn't really guaranteed, and I was going to lose even more. I lost my childhood. I didn't have a teenage life. I didn't have real friends. Now I'm going to lose my father too. I think that's really one of the first things that opened my eyes. I would love to tell you that I got it right away. It wasn't that way. You know, I did relapse. I had about a year clean, and then the next thing I know, I was in a minivan filled with stolen equipment, driving through East New York, Brooklyn, with the nickel-plated 357 underneath my seat. And I went out on a 24-hour binge, and I realized right then how quick it was. It's just, I went right back as if no time had left. And you know, drugs will welcome you back like an old friend. And it was no different. Nothing was different. Everything was the same. And I knew the devastation was going to be the same. But the problem was, the next day when I went home, I saw people from my family, because it was around this time of year, and it was around a holiday in my religion. And I had a whole bunch of people in my family tell me how proud they were, because I'm doing such great things now, that I'm clean and I'm sober. And meanwhile, I had this terrible lie inside me because I wasn't clean. And that was, I think after that, 3 days later was April 1st, and I took a drive up to this farm in Hancock, New York, where I got sober. And as soon as I saw everybody that I lived with, I couldn't hold it. I started crying. And that was the last time I ever got high. I have all these feelings going on. The hardest thing for me is I'm insecure. The hardest thing for me is all these doubts that I have in my head. And when when you have a headache, you take aspirin, and you take aspirin and the headache's gone. Well, there's no aspirin for the heart. There's no aspirin for emotion, really. So I had all these feelings, and I had all these resentments, and I started feeling uncomfortable. I didn't feel like I fit in again, and I started feeling all these old feelings. So what I did was I went back to default settings. I went back to the exact way I behaved before because I didn't know how to solve it. I was afraid to let go of the pain. And that's really the big thing. That's with addiction, with a certain lifestyle, whether it's street life, gangster life, whatever you want to call it, all that tough guy nonsense, I held on to that because I understood that. I knew what the rules of engagement were. With sobriety and life on life's terms, the rules of engagement, they're not so clear to me. I didn't know what to expect. I had this big, huge fear of the unknown. So after a while, I freaked out. I gave in. And I went back to my default settings of what I could understand. I know what drugs do, and I know how good they feel. I still get urges. I still have dreams. I still remember it very well. I still have old friends that I'm in touch with, and I love them. I love them like blood, like family. Just because they live a certain way, I gotta love them from a distance, man. I get urges. I get ideas. I think those are natural. They call this a disease, and they say your disease talks to you. My disease talks to me too, but I've had to learn that my disease is no different than like a bratty child, right? It's just always, play with me, I need attention, I want this. And the dad in me has to say, okay, we're gonna take care of this. Usually it's just my reason. When I get my urges most is when I'm feeling fear, when I'm feeling uncomfortable, when I feel like I'm being put down, when I feel like I can't fit in. That's when the urges come up. So what I have to do is rather than, the urge is just a symptom. I try to deal with everything underneath, because if I just worry about the symptom, I'm never gonna get better. If you've ever had food poisoning and you got sick to your stomach and you were gonna throw up, and someone said, well, just don't throw up. Would you be able to do that? No. Addiction is kind of like that. Well, just don't do that. The word just is an amazing thing. Just don't be sad. Just don't be depressed. Just don't feel insecure. Just don't think this way. Just don't think that way. It doesn't work like that. If it was just that easy, addiction wouldn't exist, would it now? The problem we have, we're educating kids. That's great. We're empowering kids. That's great. I do a lot of speaking in schools, and I see a big difference in the way I speak. I don't like to talk about what I did. I like to talk about how I felt. Talking about what I did puts honor where it doesn't belong. I'd rather place honor where it belongs and talk about my feelings, my emotions, why I did what I did, rather than this is what I did. Otherwise, some kid's gonna sit in the back row thinking that's a gloriful thing to do. I'm gonna glorify getting high or being a junkie or being tough. There's no glory about that. There's no glorifying anything. There's no honor in that. So when I speak, and what I'd like to do is come at it from a different way. What do you think about this being your country? What do you think about this being the epidemic in your country? What do you think about this fact that we make up 5% of the world's population, yet we consume 80% of the opiates? No one talks about these things. It's not just about the doctors prescribing them. It's not just about what's in your medicine cabinet. It's about the way we communicate. Look at our society. Look at the bullying. Look at what's going on. Everyone wants to talk about help. Everyone wants to talk about action. I'm not talking. I'm done with talking. It's the hardest thing to do is just to find someone that's willing to talk to you and with you and listen. Most people want to tell you what they know. One common thing that we all have is everyone has the need to be right. Being right hasn't worked for us. How about listening? How about interacting? How about communicating with your kids? Instead of telling them you're just too young, you don't know anything yet, you'll understand when you get older. That's the worst thing you could tell your kid. You don't know. When you get older, you'll understand. Because right then, they need you to understand. And you're telling them how they're different. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I'd like to see a new dynamic in the way we teach our children. I'm working on that right now. About a year ago, I got involved with one of North New Jersey's opiate overdose recovery programs. And what I did was I got certified to go bedside. When someone overdoses on heroin, myself or someone that works with the company or gives out their time will go bedside and will offer them the idea to go into treatment. I was involved with something called Operation Helping Hand, whereas rather than arrest somebody after a sweep through a neighborhood, rather than arrest them and process them, I sat down with them as a recovery specialist and coached them into treatment. I had 29 clients, 5 or 6 of them were clean. And I think those numbers are astounding. I think that's incredible. I think we gotta change the fight. So what I started to do is I ran an empowerment class in the homeless shelter. Actually, before I got here, I run a class in the Bergen County Jail, and I hate this fight. No one hates addiction more than me. There's people that tell me they hate it more than me. Then I say, then what are you doing about it? Me, I wake up in the middle of the night when someone calls me at 3 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock in the morning, or 1 o'clock. I'll do anything I can now. I'm tired of what I see. I love my country, and it's time we make a change. I speak at high schools, and when I go to parents' night, 5 parents show up. Now, the parents in the school, they'll love to complain about, what are you doing? What are you doing? But when it's time for them to show up, they don't. What do you got to do? You got to show up. Learn what your resources are. If you see something and you say nothing, that's a problem. They say it takes a village to raise the child. Well, my question to you is, where's the village? What are you doing about it? You can't go to your school and to the teachers and to the police and say, what are you doing about my kid? We got to start pointing the finger at us and say, what are we going to start doing about this? If change starts from within, where does it start then? It starts with us. When are we going to start doing that? That's what we need to do. We need to communicate with each other. There needs to be this thing called community, which we used to have, but you don't see anymore. There's Al-Anon, there's Nar-Anon, there's self-help programs. You cannot be a victim to your child. You can't. You got to do something. Interact with them. Listen to them, but don't listen to their lies, and don't let their lies win. Don't give in to manipulation. Enabling your child. Be fully aware. If you just say, oh, well, maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. One of the things I do with opiate overdoses is I see parents that tomorrow never came. And I hear from parents that say, I just wish I said something. So my advice to you is say something, do something, get help. There's help out there. Nobody could have stopped me. Nobody could have stopped me. I chose to stop. That's true. But my mother and father, had they been more educated about the disease of addiction or alcoholism, had they been more informed about how I felt, maybe they could have helped me. Maybe they could have. What I would do, I'd be more involved, more interactive. I wouldn't talk down to my kid. We've been talked down to enough. You know, shaming doesn't help anyone get sober. Shaming does not get anyone clean. The only way you're going to get someone clean is to empower them. We live in a what's in it for me world. So let's give a kid the reason, show them what's in it for me. Let's show them. You know, parents, you can't give up. But allowing them to go to jail or putting them in, if they get arrested and letting them sit their time, that's not giving up. That's allowing them to pay the consequences of their action. Enabling it takes that away. And if they've never had to pay for anything they've done, how are you helping them? When I was a little kid, I was small. I got bullied and picked on, and this whole path that I've been on has led me to who I am now. So I'm a dad. I'm an ordained minister. I'm a published author. I'm a coach. I help people in my community. I will one day build a school. And I want to build a school for kids who are like me, who just didn't feel like they fit in, and who felt like no matter how hard they tried, no matter the harder they would try, it's just like this emotional quicksand. You just sink in deeper. I'm going to build a place one day for kids like us, and they won't have to feel that way. That's who my past, that's what this created. This is who I am now. I ain't proud of who I was then, but I'm proud of who I am now. I was 18 years old, and that was my last time in rehab. I had a little bit of clean time on me, but you know, it was my last time in rehab, and I remember sitting inside. I had tried to commit suicide when I was in rehab because I thought this was as good as it was going to get, and that wasn't that good, and I didn't think I was going to be successful at all, and it was my last day, and we sat in this group, and they told us the odds. It's 1 out of 33 people make it. 1 out of 33 people make it. And I remember listening, and then the counselor goes, you just have to decide which one you want to be. Later on, I was sitting outside the cafeteria because the rehab was an old hotel in Kerhonkson, New York, when it was the Borscht Belt, and it was changed over into a rehab. And I was sitting outside the big cafeteria, and there was a group of guys sitting down talking about who's going to make it and who's not. So they started going over all the names, and I was young, so they called me the kid. They went for this guy, this guy, this guy. Oh, yeah, he's going to make it. Oh, yeah, he's going to make it. That guy, I'm not sure, man, but he sounds like he really wants us. And then I heard someone laugh and say, yeah, what about the kid? And that was me. And they were laughing. So I was like, oh, maybe they think I'm cool. Maybe they think I'm funny. And then they go, that kid's going to be dead before he gets down to the end of the road. And they all voted against me. And they laughed that I was going to kill myself again or die or be in jail or with a bullet through my head. That was the day I decided I was going to be that one that made it. I've always been the underdog. I love being the underdog because no one can see me coming. No one expects me to come. I'm standing in front of law enforcement. I have the prosecutor's office calling me to help and allowing me to work with them. I have the amazing opportunity to be involved with politics on this. I would have never had this. You know, I am blessed to have the opportunities I have, and blessed to work with the people I work with, blessed to know the people I know. And I'm a lucky man because my friends that I miss, my friends that are dead, this is for you. I write a lot, and one of the things I write about is I write about the 45-year-old me. I write about the 30-year-old me. I write about the 20-year-old me, the 17, the 15, the 13-year-old me. And I always try to interact with that kid that I used to be. And if I could tell him now, anything now, I'm like, don't believe it. It's all a lie. You all good. You all worth it. You're so much better than you give yourself credit for. People do like you. Stay out of your own head. Don't give in, kid. That's what I would say. One of my oldest friends, I'll call him Toothpick because that was his nickname. Toothpick was on the phone with me one day and he said, if we had us to talk to all those years ago, maybe we wouldn't have had to go through this. See, the problem with therapists and counselors, they're almost seen like authority sometimes, and they're a little intimidating. They were to me. But if I would have had someone like me to talk to, sure. That's why I decided to get into coaching. That's why I want to work with kids. Because it's great. I go to a hospital and I meet someone that overdosed and I try to help them. What would it look like if I got to you when you were 10 years old and told you, wait, we could do this a totally different way? That's why I like to work with kids. I started coaching just for that reason. People do get clean. People do get sober. It does work. One of the things they say at the end of a 12-step meeting is, it works if you work it, you're worth it. It's true. There's a lot of ways, there's a lot of paths to recovery. I don't know what yours is, I just know what mine was. I'm still here. I proved those guys wrong that said that kid's never going to make it. Wouldn't it be cool if you could prove them wrong too?